So I'm just going to say, I'm going to introduce Becky May, who's going to introduce the topic tonight. And she was kind enough to help us get the speaker who is coming and has a presentation to make about fair trade food, why it's important, why it fits with Jewish values. And as we all know, anybody who knows Becky knows that she's passionate about this. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Becky. So why don't you get started?
Well, I don't have much to say for myself. I'm looking forward to learning from the presentation as well, to be honest, because passion does not equal informed or educated or anything like that. But I wanted to say two quick things since we're still waiting on our speaker. One of which is to Rabbi Woodward's point that I just recently visited Brighton Beach for the first time in my life and discovered pickled apples in brine as a Russian phenomenal food. So I did whole apples. I had no idea that you could do that or that you would do that. But anyway, changed my world. But the other thing I was going to say in anticipation of Susan's presentation is I'm actually sitting in a room in the what's known as the state of Maine to most of us, only incorporated as of 1820. Before that, it was actually, believe it or not, Massachusetts. Go figure. But before that, which is my main point, as CJ and I have been traveling around in the last few days, we have been getting educated about the people who lived here before that, and wanted to sort of acknowledge. So the room that I'm sitting in right now is in the territory of two Wabanaki tribes, and it just made me think about trade and fair trade and food, and how from the very, very beginnings of this country, there have been issues around trade and fairness around trade, or lack of fairness around trade. And that has just kind of continued to grow along with the country. And hopefully the tide is in the process of turning. That is my sincere hope. Speaking of which, we saw today something called a reversing waterfall. That is a tide phenomenon that also exists in the state of Maine and not too many other places. So put it on your bucket list. And meantime, we have this wonderful presentation that we can begin to explore. And Susan, when she arrives, can get more personal with it perhaps. But again, thank you all for being here. And we are hopeful that as a result of this and other ongoing education and discussion, Becky, the synagogue, will be able to begin to think about updating its food policies with fairness in mind.
Well, I'll just jump in and say my 2 cents. Becky's and I have had many conversations on this topic over the years, and she certainly has had many conversations with folks at Becky. But one basic thing that always stuck in my mind every year at Pesach is that Pesach is a holiday in which we remember slavery. We remember being enslaved. And on that holiday, and frankly, any other holiday or time we sit down to dinner, wouldn't it make sense for us to be sure that the food that we are enjoying in our celebration of our freedom is not from people who have no freedom or are in one way or another incarcerated or forced into producing the food that we're enjoying? And so I think when she mentioned this to me at Pesach a number of years ago, it just stuck right there. And it really became important for me to remember that whenever I'm enjoying something in my freedom, we should really understand and be certain that other people who are producing that for our joy are sharing in that freedom as well.
All right, roll them.
Well, Susan is still not here, correct?
No, but we do have her PowerPoint. Rachel,
Oh, the
I think
PowerPoint, we have it. So we're going to just set that up and go?
Yeah,
Great.
I think so, right? Rachel, isn't that the plan?
Well, we can.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought that was the plan.
Shoshana, didn't you say something about an explanation of why this topic, why now? And we haven't heard that yet. I mean, beyond, I mean, yes, CJ is right. It's something we should be conscious of all the time.
I mean,
But
now, I don't think I'm not sure I said anything about why now, but I mean, now, because it just happened, because we've been living in this is my own personal opinion. We've been living the way we've been living for a long time without really exploring thinking about where our food comes from, what's involved in the land and the people, not to mention the healthfulness or lack thereof of the food. And so we have to start. We can't just wait any longer. It's coming, and also, yeah, the climate is changing. Things are only going to get harder. So we really have to think seriously about what we eat, how much we eat, where we get it, and who's involved. And I see, I thought I saw that Susan.
Yeah,
Yes,
Susan's
Susan
here.
has
Hey, Susan.
joined.
I'm here.
Hey,
Marga, I just wanted to add a PS that when you say why now, it's been a work in progress over many years, slowly beginning to talk about it, think about it, and try things at Becky. And we're now looking to sort of make, hopefully, a bigger step towards a more unified policy. That's why.
Okay, that's the piece I was missing, the Becky
Gotcha,
piece.
sorry, thank you. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
it's great to have you. And we were about to get started without you, but it's much better that you're here. Do you want to say
Sorry about
anything?
that. Yeah, I couldn't get into the Zoom, but thanks for rescuing me.
No problem, no problem. So, Susan, do you want to say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I've been at Equal Exchange, which you'll learn about in a couple of minutes, for 17 years. About 10 of those years, I've been the interfaith manager. We have 12 different faith-based groups, and our Jewish group, which has a partnership with Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, is one of our partnerships. And we work with different congregations to let them know about what we do, because congregations are often working for social justice, trying to eliminate poverty. And so, our missions match. And oftentimes people of faith really get what we do and embrace what we do. So I'm really delighted to come and talk to you tonight. Just so you know, I myself am Jewish. I'm a Reformed Jew, and I'm a member of Temple Sinai, which is a Reformed temple in Providence, Rhode Island. And I have been for many years. So that's who I am, and I'm going to be telling you more about Equal Exchange
Temple
very
Sinai.
soon.
Isn't Temple Sinai in Cranston?
It is in Cranston. You're right. You're right. I live in Providence. Temple Sinai
grew
is
up-
in Cranston.
Cranston.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. You grew up in Cranston? You're muted.
Oh, before my parents moved to Jamestown, we lived in Cranston, and I went to Wheeler and Providence.
Oh, great. Yeah, I live in Providence on the east side, but my mom, who is about to be 97 years old, came to Rhode Island 13 years ago, and she moved into a senior living complex in Cranston. And so the closest temple for us was Temple Sinai. So we began to go to that temple. It's been a really great temple. Are you guys, what are you, Reformed, conservative?
We're a conservative shul.
Okay, good to know.
Susan, do you want to show the slides yourself, or do you need me to project them?
I would really like it if you would project the slides. That would really help me a lot.
Okay, so you'll let me know when we should put it up?
Yeah, I'll just say next slide, please.
Okay.
I mean, you can put it up now if you would like, and I'll start. We ready to start?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So this is really, this program is going to be asking you, how much you know about the food you eat, where it comes from, and how agricultural products come from supply chains, and what supply chains actually are, because that's what we do. We provide, Equal Exchange provides an alternative economic supply chain to the corporate supply chain. So things I want you to think about as you listen to this is, what is the true cost of products you buy beyond just getting a cheap price at the grocery store. The food choices that we make affect real people who are growing them, and they also affect the earth. So this is a story of Equal Exchange, a mission-based alternative trading company that's been working on challenging issues around our food system for the last 35 years. So next slide, please. In 1986, the Equal Exchange founders were working at a co-op, and they were buying produce, organic produce, and they saw a disconnect between consumers and the sources of their food. So most people at that time didn't have any information about the growers and the true cost of growing food. They were concerned, people were concerned, they were starting to get concerned at that point about the increased use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and seeing that farmers in the global South were particularly vulnerable to fluctuating market prices and exploitation. So they built this company that aimed to change that. And so Equal Exchange was founded in 1986 as the first fair trade company in the United States, and it was structured as a worker-owned cooperative. I will tell you that the fair trade movement actually started in Europe, and the three founders had heard about it and learned about it and brought it to the United States. Next slide, please. So this is our mission statement: to build long-term partnerships that are economically just and environmentally sound, to foster mutually beneficial relations between farmers and consumers, and to demonstrate through our success the viability of worker cooperatives and fair trade. Also to let you know, we are structured as a for-profit company. We intentionally did not structure ourselves as a nonprofit because we wanted to be actual traders in the world of trading, providing a different model. So we're not a nonprofit organization, although we do have a nonprofit mission. Next slide, please. So these are some of the principles of fair trade or authentic fair trade: direct trading partnerships, long-term trading relationships, guaranteed minimum price and additional fair trade premiums, and giving farmers access to credit to avoid predatory loans that keep them in debt. Next slide, please. So this is, on the bottom, you can see a conventional supply chain. And it might be a little hard to read, but you can see there are a lot of different players that get involved, and everyone who gets involved in bringing food to, let's say, from another country to the United States takes a cut. So we cut out a lot of the middle people, and you can see at the top that these are the people that we deal with. The farmers grow the food, they're collected at farmer co-ops. The coffee is roasted at Equal Exchange, and then you buy the coffee or the products wherever you buy it at a store. So all of those other exporters, brokers, distributors have been eliminated. There's so many different steps in the chain. And the farmer, if there isn't this type of system, the farmer is the player in that gets the least amount of money. Next slide, please. So other ways in which fair trade works, other principles of fair trade are, there are no plantations. We do not deal with plantations. That's the old colonial system where all of the workers are treated basically as serfs. Even the ones that are organized in a better fashion pay very little. There are no benefits or poor benefits. Their children can't get educated. No one leaves the plantations. People are stuck on plantations. We do not deal with any groups that use child labor. Child labor is something that we explicitly forbid. We work with democratically run cooperative partners, and we visit our partners constantly. I mean, this was before COVID, we did, to see what's going on, to make sure that all of their practices are right, are correct. There's gender equity training and money for special projects that's available. And there's development assistance for different projects on productivity and, you know, trying to increase productivity. Kind of agricultural consultation is brought in when necessary. Okay, next slide, please. So Equal Exchange is in itself structured as a worker-owned cooperative. So we have about 100 and we laid some people off during COVID, but we have about 120 worker owners. Our principles are one chair, one vote. That's okay. So we're not a nonprofit, but we're a nonprofit maximizing. Our employee pay ratio is 5-to-1. That means the person getting the highest amount of money in the cooperative gets no more than 5 times the amount of the person that's just entering as a worker, which is, you can compare to corporations, which sometimes is hundreds of times more that the highest earning employee brings in. And we're not beholden to shareholders or tempted to sell out. So a lot of companies that start off caring about fairness or producing a really good product or being independent eventually will sell out to a large corporation. We've seen this over and over again. Ben & Jerry's, Tom's of Maine toothpaste, Annie's, I mean, the list goes on and on. There's probably about 6 or 7 large corporations currently that own all of the brands of food that we eat. And eventually, even the small brands with a lot of integrity will sell out, sell off, because they've done it long enough, and that's how they make their money in the end. We will never, we have it in our bylaws, we will never sell to a large corporation. We will pay back our shareholders if we need be, if we're ever at the point of going out of business, and we will give our business to another fairly traded co-op, you know, organization. So that's that. Okay, next slide, please. So though we started off importing coffee, that was our first product, and actually it's still 70% of what we sell. We currently work with about 40 small-scale cooperatives in 20 countries, and 12 of these are coffee cooperatives. Coffee is the largest food import in the US, and we consume, as Americans, we consume 20% of the world's coffee. Equal Exchange also sources tea, chocolate, nuts, olive oil, dried fruit, fresh bananas, and avocados. And in recent years, we've been looking into more domestic fair trade in the US, like we bring in pecans from a Black farmer collective called New Communities in Georgia, and cheese from small dairy farms in Wisconsin and Vermont. So next slide, please. So, sorry, I'm trying to keep ahead of this. Challenges for small scale farmers. There's volatile market prices. And farmers don't have direct access to international markets. As we know, there's climate-related issues, which we'll talk about more later, drought and disease. And farmers often require expensive equipment, and they need expertise from people who can teach them, from agronomists. We are not ourselves agronomists, but we bring in agronomists from different regions and different countries to supply technical expertise. 2 of the most well-known tenets of fair trade are guaranteed minimum price and social premiums. So the coffee market fluctuates widely, and even so, we always pay more than the market does per pound for these items to farmers, even when the market prices are high. There's a fair trade minimum price paid to small farming co-ops to cover the cost of sustainable production. So while not all fair trade products have a set minimum price, coffee does, and we always pay above that price. This price is set by an organization called the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, or FLO. And in addition to the fair price, farmers also have access to credit, allowing them to avoid predatory loans that keep them in debt. So, next slide, please. So during the pandemic, there have been even more challenges for farmers. When the pandemic, thank you, Eric. Good night. When the pandemic started, farmers were isolated, roads were closed, ports were closed, people couldn't get food. The co-ops actually came through for farmers and delivered food to farm families and kept them going. They didn't have masks, they didn't have equipment. Now they still don't have enough vaccines. So farmers are still very, very much involved and entrenched in what's going on with the pandemic. But as we saw during the pandemic also, there was corporate consolidation, where small businesses were going out of business and more people were ordering their food and all kinds of products from corporations. So there was more corporate consolidation under the pandemic. More small independent brands struggling and going out of businesses, including, as you all know in your area, restaurants and all kinds of small stores. And the supply chains were disrupted, and they are actually still disrupted. And that's why, as many of you know, it's hard to get all kinds of items now. There's like a long waiting list for cars and for computers and many other items. It's the same for people in the food industry. Next slide. So these are some of the things I just talked about. Closing of ports, transportation restrictions, increase in price of goods, food insecurity, all of these things. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot just to show you the purchasing impact of what we were able to purchase in 2019. And this is $19.2 million in purchases of coffee and $3.9 million in the purchase of chocolate. So we're small, but we have some impact. We're largely seen as a success story. We did survive the pandemic. We did lose sales during the pandemic, but the pandemic continues, but we are now slowly rebuilding, and people definitely look to us as a leader in the field. Next slide, please. So the reason that we deal with farmer cooperatives, so we're structured as a cooperative and we deal with democratically run cooperatives, is that there's strength in numbers. Farmer cooperatives build strong communities through working together and sharing resources. It's kind of like the Israeli kibbutz or Moshav Shatufis. So democratically organized cooperatives are made up of farmers who have more control over their financial future and businesses. They have their own governance structures and operate separately from Equal Exchange's own worker-owned cooperative. It's important for us that we choose to work with other groups whose members are also in charge of their own business. There's also gender equity training, cross-training, shared premiums, voter rights. So these are the groups that we work with. Okay, next slide, please. This is the environmental part of this presentation. We have a couple slides on this because part of what we do is we work with farmers who farm organically and sustainably and are stewards of the earth. So conventional farmers often clear-cut trees in order to plant a monoculture of coffee or other products. The removal of trees leads to soil erosion, ultimately making farmland less productive. With the soil's natural fertility depleted, conventional farms rely on chemical pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, which are harmful for the environment and for people's health. Coffee and cacao are grown in the shade of the forest trees, which allow for birds and wildlife to flourish, and can't happen if trees are cut down. The carbon sponge is the key to nature's ability to draw down carbon from the atmosphere and return it to the soil. So the farmers who are part of our project use agricultural practices, and they don't use chemical pesticides and herbicides. The soil is enriched through composting and natural supplements, helping to build the carbon sponge. Next slide, please. So organic farming adds additional benefits related to sustainability. Interplanting of different varieties of trees is used versus clear-cutting practices. Again, this prevents soil erosion. And biodiverse planting also helps to protect crops from pests and disease. Wildlife habitats are sustained through shade-grown coffee and cacao. So this is a major principle of the types of sustainable farming that the farmers who are part of our projects do. Next slide, please. So cheap conventional products versus organic, fairly traded products. Organic products reflect the true cost of production and labor. They do not exploit the producers. No chemicals or pesticides harming farmers are used. One of the key points here is that when pesticides are sprayed over crops, the farmers themselves are affected. Oftentimes in poor countries, there's no money for them to have masks or gloves. And when the pesticides are sprayed, they're in the fields, they breathe it in, it affects their health, it burns them, it burns their skin. So that's an important part also of not using these chemicals. Yeah, and I think I've made all the other points. So next slide, please. Okay, so the environment is something that's very, very important to us, and it's one of the principles of equal exchange. I know you also wanted to hear about some of the ethical issues and the issues that we deal with involving non-exploitation. And this chocolate is one of the areas that's very, very important because the chocolate industry uses young boys. It takes place, most of it is located in Western Africa on the Ivory Coast in Ghana. And the industry uses young boys to harvest the cacao pods. And the reports estimate that there are 2 million child laborers in the cocoa sector of the Ivory Coast in Ghana alone, which produces over 70% of the world's cocoa. So US consumers, for the most part, don't realize that this is happening. It's just, chocolate, it's candy, it's lovely, it's, happy food. And this has been going on for years in the cacao industry. The producers know about it. The corporations that deal in chocolate know about it. And they're not doing anything to change any of, to restrict this use of young boys. Just a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Nestle and Cargill in a case of slave labor happening in Mali. Why? Because the practices were not happening on US soil. And why is this happening? Many cocoa farming families in the Ivory Coast and Ghana make roughly $2 a day, making it difficult to pay their laborers to harvest their crop. And so children are often trafficked and lured by the promise of great paying jobs. They never leave, or they can't buy their way out. They can't leave these plantations. So if farmers were paid enough to stay on their own land, feed their families, things would be different. So that's just a very quick summary of what's going on in the area of chocolate and cacao. Next slide, please. So it's important to try to find out where your chocolate is from, where your other products are from, to make sure that people aren't exploited. And you have to be careful because fair trade labeling isn't always what it seems to be. There are some large agribusinesses such as Nestle's that use this Fair Trade USA seal, which is currently used for certifying large plantations, and they don't require strong environmental practices either. So you really have to know what brands you're buying and not rely upon seals. Next slide, please. So here are some different brands. And Nestle's, Hershey's, Mars are three of the largest. Well, somebody asked what seals should we watch out for? Well, you should avoid Nestle's, Hershey's, and Mars because they're some of the largest companies, and they are all using these practices. At the end, I'm going to talk about the Fair World Project, and I'll give you a site where you can look up other companies and organizations that have ethically sourced chocolate, just as Equal Exchange does. So certainly if you buy our chocolate, you're avoiding this type of exploitation. And there are other companies who also avoid exploitation. So we'll see that in a couple minutes. Next slide, please. So what can you do to promote food justice? Become a food justice advocate. Learn about that. Tonight's presentation is the start of you learning about this. Maybe some of you have already been involved in food justice. Next slide, please. So there are companies called alternative trade organizations, or ATOs, who make a commitment to working directly with indigenous peoples and to market their products directly to consumer. And they also cut out the middle people. The World Fair Trade Organization, which I just mentioned, does also communicate ideas about fair trade. And there are other organizations like the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, which will list organizations. So Equal Exchange also works with TRUA, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. We've had a 7-year relationship with them. Before that, we worked with American Jewish World Service. So they have certified is too strong a word, but they acknowledge and that we are fairly traded and authentic fair trade, and they put the stamp of approval on what we do. Next slide, please. One of the things that we do, and one of the ways that you can get involved, particularly with the chocolate, is at Passover time, we offer a Seder host box, which has 9 different kosher for Passover chocolate bars. And they can be ordered, and you can order them individually, or you could order them through your synagogue, and you can bring them, if you're going in person to someone's home for a Seder this year, you can bring them as a gift. But in addition to the Seder host box, we have a lot of different types of chocolate bars that are kosher for Passover. We have chocolate chips and mini chocolates and baking cocoa, all kosher for Passover. And they're kosher before Passover, but then they're also kosher for Passover. And our coffee, our unflavored coffee, and our unflavored teas are kosher, and they're also kosher for Passover. So Chua promotes our chocolates during Passover. Next slide, please. So you can get involved in your community, and you can, if you want to bring some of these products that have been chosen from these cooperatives, from these democratically run cooperatives, and you know, that change the way that food is being dealt with. You can actually form a buying club in your neighborhood and order for people, which is something that I did during the pandemic. I just chose people right within walking distance or short driving distance, ordered food, avoided the $135. If you order more than $135 worth of food, you avoid the shipping costs. And then I delivered them to people's homes when they arrived. So we didn't have to have an interaction. But you can leave them on your porch, you can leave them in your garage, you can package them up, you can put them outside your synagogue on a certain day in a bag with people's names on them, and make sure that people get the items that they want. You can buy these as a synagogue, whether you buy them individually or as a synagogue. Yeah, somebody gives them as Hanukkah gifts, Mishloach Manot, baskets. If you buy them wholesale and you mark them up, you can mark them up, and you can do a fundraiser for your brotherhood, sisterhood, youth group, whatever you need in your temple. And then we say, you know, go beyond fair trade food. There's also different fair trade artisan groups like 10,000 Villages and Serve and other groups where artisans are paid a fair price for what they make. Next slide, please. So during the pandemic, there were all of these businesses that were going under, and we started supporting them. And so now if you go to the equalexchange.coop or shop.equalexchange.coop, that's our store, online store. And you can see, if you go to grocery, like other foods and grocery, you'll see that we carry main grains, rolled oats and wheat flour. I'm just going to give you, we have about 25 items, but pancake mix, granola, peanut butter, almond butter, all kinds of spices from a wonderful independent spice company, marinara sauce, crushed tomatoes, hot sauce, crackers, Dr. Bronner's coconut oil, and we do carry cheese from 2 different groups. The groups are Neighborly in Vermont and Red Barn in Wisconsin. There's an epidemic in the cheese industry where milk is so cheap that farmers can't afford to keep their herds anymore. This has been going on for the last 25 years. And so dozens and dozens of dairy farms have been just going out of business every year. So the only way that they can make a living is to produce or create artisan cheese. And then there's value added. So we carry cheese from 2 different groups. Someday we hope to add more cheese. These are US farmers, and you can order them by the 6-pack. You know, they come with ice packs. So so there's the cheese, there's all these different grocery products that we've added to the list of products that you can personally buy or buy together with your congregation. Next slide, please. So this is the Fair World project that I was telling you about. This is their website. You can look into other brands, other food products. that have the strictest fair trade certifications and join their campaigns. And that just gives you another source of information. And final slide, please. Yeah, so I'll just read this. When you choose Equal Exchange, you're supporting a more equitable alternative trade system that empowers local communities, small farm families worldwide. You're also protecting the earth by supporting sustainable products, and you're not consuming products that are made exploiting children. So we ask you for your support, for your solidarity, for you to think about how you're buying your food, where you're buying your food, who it's affecting, if it's affecting the earth, and to really think about using an alternative economic supply chain, which is very, very different from the corporate supply chain, because it's not all about the bottom line. It's really about what you're doing with your dollars and creating something that's very, very different. So thank you for listening. And I'm wondering, if you guys have any questions or concerns. I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
I have some questions from Becky, but is there anybody else who wants to start? Does anybody else have a question they want to start with? Joanne, you want to unmute?
I've been an organic gardener for, 35 to 40 years, and I grow most of my own vegetables during the season, but I also like to support local organic farmers.
Sure.
And I think that's really important because they're working really hard to create, and a lot of them are very young. This summer, I started working with a young woman who started an organic farm in Orange 2 years ago. And if anyone was at Shabbat services 2 weeks ago, there were huge platters of roasted vegetables. And I'm on team one. And when Jennifer put out a call for the menu, she had a salad. And I said, the farms have such gorgeous vegetables now. Let's not get Costco, although some of them are organic. Let's go to my local farm. And I went there, I picked the eggplants, I picked the squash, I picked the peppers. The only thing that was purchased were the onions, the red onions. And we had huge platters of roasted vegetables, and we supported a local organic farmer. This is her second year. She's in the process of being certified. It takes a couple of years to be certified as an organic farmer. She uses no chemicals, no pesticides. It's really healthy organic farming. She's feeding the soil, not artificially feeding plants that grow fast and poison the soil. So I also suggest we think about supporting local organic farms.
Thank you for saying that, Joanne. Absolutely. That's definitely one thing that we can do as we rethink how we buy our food, and that's a very important thing to do to support local farmers. So
and
I totally agree with you.
She brings her produce to the New Haven Green. There's a farm market every Wednesday afternoon on the New Haven Green, and it's called South Haven Farms. And she's one of the people. She can't put a sign up that she's organic because she has not yet been certified. It's only her second year, but I go and volunteer there because I want her to succeed. And 2 other women work with me, and we help her plant, weed, farm, harvest at least once a week to help her out. She's doing this all by herself. She's 32 years old.
Wow.
And very admirable.
That's great. Yeah, it's great that more people are doing this. There are, examples of people who are doing this around the country. And yeah, we need to support them. We need to help them to survive. And we need to be, they're thinking about our food and our food sources, thinking about getting us healthy food. So absolutely, that there are people that we definitely encourage you to support. I will say that with a number of our products, they're not grown in the United States, like coffee, cacao, tea. They're grown in other countries. So we got started with those products, but if you can support people growing locally, that's definitely the way to go.
I will just throw in that coffee is being considered now in the US because of climate change. So I hope
Yes.
Equal Exchange will jump on that.
Yeah. No, we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, there's there's some questions about coffee, even as a crop. Like people are now seeing, because of the pandemic and because of these breaks in the supply chain, there's going to be less coffee, and coffee may not be available in the next 10, 20 years. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with coffee. But yeah, maybe it will start being grown in the United States.
Cynthia, you had a question?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had worked with American Jewish World Service. I don't know
Yeah.
what the status is now. I actually was a volunteer with American Jewish World Service in Senegal,
Cool.
with a group, Green Senegal, that was teaching people to do sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
And I have to say, teaching was their phrase, not necessarily, so it sounds paternalistic, but I didn't make that up. So there is a struggle in countries with extreme poverty, and who are losing, I mean, they were doing these are people who were nomadic and then settled down just a few generations ago and started sustainable agriculture, and have to find a way to get beyond sustainable agriculture in their villages. So I'm wondering if you're doing any work still with American Jewish World Service or with other groups, and how you balance that challenge to actually make a living, because traditional practices don't give enough yield generally.
Yeah. American Jewish World Service changed its focus at a certain point more towards women and girls. And so that was when we shifted to Trua. But yeah, we definitely, work with farmers to, as I said, during the pandemic, there was a shortage of food. So people did start growing more food for themselves and their families on their farms. And, we're encouraged to do so by the different cooperatives. But yeah, people on the farms that we deal with grow their own food and also grow enough for the market. And again, there's a group in Honduras that runs a farm school, and many farmers from Central and South America attended. It's a group called COMSA, and they actually teach how to increase yields through using microorganisms in soil and vermiculture and all different kinds of methods to farmers to help them to try to increase their yield so that they are able to make a better living through their crops and through their organic crops, and also through natural pesticide, natural pest control. So it is something that farmers really need to think about, and people who are poor, who are, living very close to the edge, really have to learn how to do, for sure.
I should add that Green Senegal was teaching people how to make compost piles, for example, and use that for food.
Yeah.
So there was some of that happening, but I don't know how organic everything was beyond that. It was a number of years ago. It's like 15 years ago.
Yeah, well, if they were composting, I mean, chances are they were thinking about organic agriculture. But yeah, I mean, in addition, as I was talking about in the slideshow, with the changes with climate change, there are more incidents of extreme weather. So you have flooding, and you have, things are blooming out of cycle. So you have moldy coffee cherries, and you have, coffee cherries that dry up and are too parched and don't produce. So things, are difficult for farmers all over the world now with climate change and with the environment changing. So there's a lot of challenges. And even though we've been working for 35 years and have developed this area of fair trade, we are still a drop in the bucket, compared to other agricultural, other farms and agricultural production in the world. So, and farmers are definitely a very, imperiled group.
I had a question earlier in the chat about asking why you guys don't do sugar, cane sugar, and vanilla, or if that's something that you have thought about, or do you want to speak to that?
Actually, we do work with groups in those two areas. A group in Paraguay does organic sugar, and we get the sugar for our chocolate bars from them. And we do work with a group in Madagascar on organic vanilla. So we do work with different
good.
groups. Yeah.
Becky, did you want to ask, you had some other questions. Do you want to ask them yourself, or do you want me to read them off here?
You're muted, so we can't
You're
hear you,
muted.
Becky.
Sorry. Well, quick follow-up on that one. Is there a reason why you don't market sugar and vanilla? Even though you use it in the cocoa, in the chocolate, but I'm just curious why it isn't one of your direct products available, because it's a big problem in the supermarket. Those are hard to find, and people use a lot of them.
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I'll try to find out. One of our jobs is to locate groups and to make sure that we can get enough of the product so that we can supply it to stores, and we can sell it on our own web store. And it may be that we were not able to get enough of a supply to make it worthwhile. I know vanilla is also in a very scarce commodity these days. So it could be that we were able to contract to get enough vanilla and sugar for our chocolate products, but that we couldn't get enough to just market it individually. But I will look into that. It's a good question.
Yeah, thanks. And also, I was curious what you thought. You referenced the fair trade certification. The two others I know of that also address child slavery, which is really I'm interested in all of it, but that's a particular concern, is UTS and Rainforest Alliance, both of which also have slightly different focuses, but
what's the first one? Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
UTZ, UTZ, that's the European, I think, from out of the Netherlands, but it's like, for example, several of the large chocolate companies are now selling, lines of their product certified by UTZ. And so I have a big curiosity and interest in that, because of course, the more mainstream that in some ways that, this can become, the more impact it can have in terms, I happen to agree with the model of equal exchange, but I also want to see as many people using fair trade chocolate as possible, and they buy the big brands, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
So what do you think about UTS and Rainforest Alliance? Because those are other certifications I promote, and
I think they're probably fine. I don't personally know. Again, I would look under the fairworldproject.org and see if they're listed there, because they do list a lot of the different producers. My sense is both of those groups are good groups, and whenever you can support other groups that are doing good work, that we're totally encouraging you to do that.
Yeah, not oftentimes they're offering products that equal exchange may not carry. They're just varieties, versions. Yeah.
No, we're just we're a small group and we can't do everything. I mean, I'll say that we're all part of a movement together. All the groups that do this kind of work, if it's authentic fair trade and they're not just using it as a marketing technique like Starbucks uses it as a marketing technique. They say they use a seal. They say they're fair trade, but most of the coffee that they sell, and they never, is not fair trade, and they never brew fair trade coffee in their cafes. It's a marketing technique, but if they're actually, if a group is doing authentic fair trade, we are in a movement together. We're all part of this movement to try to change the supply chain. And we definitely want to encourage you to support those other groups.
One more quick question I'd love to hear about, and then of course, if anybody else has any, but you mentioned you're moving into more domestic products, which I think is great. And because local eating is also a movement, and it's with a mission. And does your principles extend, how does that extend towards the animals involved in, for example, the cheese projects? Are there standards that have to be met around the cows? Or?
Yeah, I mean, right now we don't have standards. There are no standards for fair trade in the dairy industry. We're just trying to locate groups that we think are operating in an ethical way. So with Red Barn, the Red Barn company in Wisconsin, the person who started that group was a veterinarian, and he makes sure that all of the cows are dealt with in a very humane manner, and that they're healthy and they get, they get the health benefits that they need. The group in Vermont is really, really interesting. It's called Neighborly Farms, and they actually have this. They have robots in their dairy farm. So I think they have a herd of about 60 cows, and the cows just live their lives. They the robots, they step on, the robots actually milk them. And so when they're ready to be milked, they'll go into this little pen. There'll be some food there. Their udders are sprayed automatically, and they get milked by the robots. It's a very, I believe the technology is from Scandinavia, and the cows just live in a very kind of gentle life, without a lot of interference by humans, and they get dealt with by these robots. So it's a very interesting project. But both groups, are very humane in the way they treat their animals. They make sure their animals are healthy, and they think about, how they think about the milk supply and about the animals. So that's definitely a piece when we were, that we were looking for when we were looking for cheesemakers.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have another question from something that Rachel wanted to mention, but I didn't know. I want to open it up and make sure everybody who's had a question has gotten a chance to ask it. And Rachel asked, she said she'd like to discuss what changes we might be able to make at Becky, or what we might want to make at Becky. And I think that it's a great question. And I think it's an ongoing thing. And I have to say, I think, Becky, you have been a real force behind this for a while. So one thing, and I don't know where we're at now, but you were really pushing hard to not have chocolate that wasn't fair trade chocolate, so that we would either have desserts that didn't have chocolate in them, or that we would buy only, make them our in-house with fair trade chocolate. And is that something that's actually happening, or it's still in the dream phase?
No dream.
It's happening,
right? Sometimes it's a nightmare, but it's, and Ellen, I want to credit Ellen, who's on this with us, because she's done a tremendous amount to support that as well. And yeah, we've met with pretty much every faction of Becky that uses chocolate, and pretty much every faction of Becky does use chocolate. That's kind of something to know. But and some are, it's at different stages. But the Kiddush committees are now baking with fair trade chocolate pretty routinely and sourcing non-chocolate things. We've ordered Equal Exchange chocolate for Passover use, because it's the one that's kosher for Passover. On a routine basis, we're looking at coffee and tea for Kiddush as well. And as part of this proposal we're making to the board about, putting together a larger ethical food policy for Becky. As a side note, Becky's involved, for others on the call who may not know, Becky's involved in this, was chosen as one of 11 synagogues to work on Jewish vegan
synagogue
Jewish vegan progress. Right. So we're putting 9 events on this year to introduce veganism and its principles, and through delicious food and education. So, but back to the chocolate piece. Oh, and Hanukkah Gelt we sell at the synagogue. I put that in the chat in case folks were not aware. And it's in progress in some of the other departments as well. Purim baskets, the religious school, the minion treats, and so forth.
So that's
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like what Joanne said, and you had done this in the past, of getting local organic produce from local farmers. And
oh yeah.
again, it sometimes seems like an extra step when you're doing the kiddish prep to think about, but it makes such a difference. In, first of all, the quality of the food is so much better because it's fresh. And also we're helping our neighbors, and we're helping keep Connecticut farming sustainable, which, you know, it's always on the brink of going under, unfortunately.
We're
So,
also not poisoning our soil
right, and not poisoning our soil, which
and our
affects all of
rivers
us.
and our streams.
Yep.
Joanne, it's so funny, after the kiddish, which was also a vegan kiddish,
Right.
Short of the challah,
Well,
I went to the person who had coordinated it, and I said, oh, that was amazing. And it would have been even more amazing if it had been local produce, which I would have been happy to provide, because I'm usually the one who has
Yeah, you're the
provided
one.
for it. And she said, oh, Joanne did that. And I was like, wow.
I picked it. It wasn't just local. I picked it myself.
I know you totally had, you upped the game.
you know,
But
we
actually,
should-
I should add, we have been working on the idea of a dedicated farmer for Becky, or farmers, where we would have a direct relationship with them, and we could ask them to grow what we want to cook.
This woman, I'm sure, would be willing to buy into that
Yeah.
because it
That's
gives
nice.
her a dedicated customer.
That's right. Well, it's almost like a CSA. You kind of have a
Right.
certain amount of income.
Right. And she's brand new to this.
Right. In the
So
future,
Susan, I have to say,
Joanne,
your organization is just, it was just one of the earliest ones there, and it made it possible for those of us who wanted to make steps in this direction, take those first steps, and that's just huge,
Yeah, no, thank you. We've been working at this, as I said, for 35 years. We've been working with faith-based groups for 25 years. And we are a success story, but there are still too few people that are really thinking about where their food is coming from and thinking about the farmers, trying to break the corporate supply chain when it comes to food. So I think it's an ongoing project to educate ourselves, to educate other people, to eat more healthy, to to think about where our food is coming from, think about the farmers, because we don't think about them enough. We do, and then even like, farmers in other countries, like your coffee for, Onegs right now. I don't know how often your temple is open, or what the situation is because of COVID, but when you do, or in the future, hopefully, we'll have in-person meetings and serve coffee, think about the coffee farmers, think about the tea farmers. So, it's important to think about as many, getting this type of food, organic food and fairly traded food from as many different farmers and vendors as you possibly can.
CJ, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we've gone around and heard about your special preparations for holiday, for instance, Pesach. But I have to ask, since it's October, has Equal Exchange ever looked to have a specialized chocolate for Halloween?
Well, we do have mini chocolates for Halloween. They come in boxes of 150. And we have a 55% dark chocolate and a 55% milk chocolate. And we give them out at our house every year. And it's nice because you really do, you can give people like, whatever, 3 to 5 kids. And they've got the label, they've got the percentage of chocolate, and it's fairly traded. So we are already in gear and, ready to supply you with chocolate. So all you have to do is order it on our website and it will come to your home in time for, you just, what's today, the 13th? Yeah, you'll get it in time for Halloween.
Fantastic. That was a trick. Did anybody look at that? Very cute. Any other, I see all of a sudden there are things here. Yes.
Yeah, the lemon ginger is delicious. It really is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And Ellen, you have been known to give out the chocolate bars as Afikoman prizes, I believe. I think I've been at your house when that has happened. So that is, and they go over, everybody loves them. I mean, the kids are not kids anymore. So I suppose, you can't say the kids love them, but everybody loves them. But well, thank you so much. This was really interesting and stimulating and gets our juices flowing. And we're going to keep trying to do better and better all the time.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're really on your way. You've
Well,
been
we're
doing this
working
for a
on it.
while and you're thinking
Yeah.
about it. You know, if there's any way that I can ever help you, you know, think about how to get other things started at your temple, you know, don't hesitate to give me a call. We also, if you go on onto our website and look under merchandise, you know, we have different brochures and pamphlets about fair trade, different materials that you might be able to use to get other people interested in your synagogue.
Great.
So thank you so much for having me.
Thank
And I
you.
would love to be a resource for you if you ever need anything else. Definitely stay in
Yes, and
touch.
thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really important and is making a difference, because I see your product in more and more places, and obviously it's, you know, that's a good thing. So
Well, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
And thanks for having me. Take care. Shalom.
Now, everyone else, I just want to let you know, next week there is not a schmooze, but there is on Shabbat, on Saturday after Shabbat, or at the end of Shabbat, there's going to be a musical showcase starting with Havdalah. Max Duboff is going to be playing the guitar. We're going to be singing. There will be song sheets. There will be a fire pit, and this is going to be in the courtyard at Becky. So I think that'll be really fun and interesting. And as Becky mentioned about the synagogue vegan challenge, people are going to be getting a notice in an email about it, and also a survey to fill out. One of the things we need to do as part of the funding is to have a pre-program survey and then a post-program survey. So please, when you get your survey, don't just put it in, don't just click it away. Take 2-3 minutes and answer the questions. And I hear a plea. Let's see, Margaret has a plea. Anyone want to come to Minyan tomorrow morning? It's at 8:15, so you can sleep in and daven and get a preview of the Torah reading for Shabbat. So, hey, that is a triple header. I'm going to be at my office starting at 7:30, so I will not be able to do that. But Margaret, are you the captain of that? Are you now a captain of the Minyan?
No, but I've been coming on Thursdays, and while this session was going on, the rabbi sent a text saying that his movers are coming at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so he can't come to Minyan. So we're down one of the regulars, and I'm a Minyan regular from where I used to live, and I am accustomed at every possible opportunity to invite people to come to Minyan.
It's a very good thing to do if you're able, as everybody on this screen knows that. So spread the word. All right, folks. Great to see you all, and see you on Shabbat.